Previously on the clapped out Outback.
Look at all that dry skin. Skin cells. Sweat. Oh. I hate steering wheels. God, they're so gross. Come on, focus.
Getting before video was a bit of an afterthought, but here I did manage to get some before pictures. And so that's what you're seeing here. It's hard to get that level of detail in a video. Camera really comes in clutch. Scrubbing bubbles, of course. The driver's door was pretty nasty, and you'll see I go over it quite a few times. Never really truly satisfied until you're satisfied. The hard plastic surfaces is where Mr. Steamy really shines. You know, skin cells and skin oils and stuff make this like putty sort of film on the hard surfaces, and Mr. Steamy does a good job of, you know, cutting that. Scrubbing bubbles helps too, but really Mr. Steamy here is doing the heavy lifting. Now, if you've watched any other YouTube channels of people doing detailing, oftentimes people will take a rag of some sort and wrap it around the head of the steam wand, and that's good practice. You'll see later when I do the dash, I'll do that. I've scratched the shit out of dashes before, and it's pretty ugly. I pretty well ruined them, so I've learned to be a little smart when it comes to the dash, but the doors themselves, they're fine. Just whatever, you know, maybe it was just the dash that I was working on. You know, these 05, 09 Legacies or Outbacks were kind of known to have a dash that got kind of soft or wasn't as hard as it should have been, so gummy, maybe. And every square inch of all of the hard plastics is going to get the same treatment here. I didn't film it all. I won't bore you with it, but just gives you an idea of the level of which we're going through. It's nice to be able to take off that scrub brush and just use the steam, you know, really push out any kind of dirt. Here, I'm running across the seam of where the window meets the seal. There's a lot of detritus that gets caught down in there, and so steam really helps to loosen it and spray it out of there. You know, little holes in the speaker grills, same sort of thing. All that accumulated dust from all of the years that the car's been around. This is going to help blow it all out. And the steam doesn't really seem to affect the speaker too much. I mean, obviously you don't want to sit there and keep going on and on and on and on and on with it, you know, and soaking the speaker, but to do what I did there, it's not a big deal. You know, and steam will work its way into all the little crevices and stuff. You can kind of, you get a feel for it, but you don't have to be so precise, it seems. funny when you go over these, 15-year-old hard plastics. It's 15 years of skin and skin oil. It's 15 years of Armor All or, whatever protectant people wanted to use. It's, 15 years of spilt soda and coffee and, French fry grease and, whatever else people do in cars. And so, the hard plastics, they kind of have like this sheen to them when you get them. They're glossy and they look like they're well protected. But after Mr. Steamy, you realize that, maybe it was sort of more of a satin finish on those hard plastics and not so much gloss. It's kind of nice. Like, you can look at it and you just go, yeah, you know what? That looks clean. That area that I'm rubbing in right there is always generally particularly nasty. The knee tends to rest against that, or people push on that a lot with their hands. Same thing with that upper portion up near the window where, if you roll the window down and you got your arm sticking out kind of thing, there's a lot of, touching there, like the steering wheel that you already saw. Now that brush had come off, and now I'm getting into those window switches. I do not fear using steam with electronics. Obviously the car is not going to be started in 5 minutes, and you're going to have a bunch of wet electronics in there. That steam dries out pretty quick. But when it comes to, window switches like that, I don't hesitate. I shove that thing down in there. I'm not recommending you do it. I certainly wouldn't do that if somebody was paying me to detail their car, but I don't offer that. I don't do that for people. I only work on my stuff. Again, the speaker grill. And you don't have to be real heavy-handed with it. And again, I've never seen any, negative effect from doing that. There'll be a few things that I'm going to touch on while doing this that, you go look at a car that's been detailed by somebody who's being paid by the hour to do it, and you'll see a lot of stuff that they miss. And this is one of those spots down inside there, that little map pocket, or I don't know, my wife uses it as like a trash can, but those things are always dirty. Nobody ever cleans those. So I spend a lot of time in that. It's those little things that count in the end. Enough of the little things turn into something big. It's amazing we can get lost down in that little thing too. I found money, I found receipts, I have found, paperwork people have left. Now that spot down there on the bottom right hand, right where I'm at right now, it seems like people's shoes have a tendency to hit right there quite a lot, and so that spot is generally fairly dirty too. Pretty scratched up as well. This car was no exception. They never are. Seems to be a rule. And I like hitting the fabric part of these doors. I just feel like it just seems fresher to me. I don't know. I don't really know why I do it. It's not like a bunch of grease or, you know, mud or anything comes running out of there. It's just, I guess it's just more about sterilizing it than anything. Yeah, it's hard to see in the video, but deep down inside there is pretty clean. And it's always a tough spot to try to get dust and stuff out. Now, I have a tendency to spend a lot of time on the steering wheels. Steering wheels are the grossest. You saw that earlier. This isn't the worst one I've seen. This one was fairly clean, but I spend a lot of time on steering wheels. And you can see right away how it gets that sort of duller, more satin sort of look to it than the rest of it. And the whole steering wheel will end up looking like that. And it just looks fresh when you're done. You know, steering wheels, the gear shifter knob, heater controls, window switches, those kinds of things are generally the most touched in a car. And so not only will they be the dirtiest, if you're planning to ever sell the car, when somebody comes to look at it as a, you know, potential purchase, the tactile things, the things that they touch the most, when they feel clean, they are clean. And so having a clean steering wheel really goes a long way towards, you know, giving people that feeling that they want to buy the car. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but there's a lot of angles on the steering wheels. You know, as far as surface area goes, it doesn't seem like much, but you know, you take that steering wheel itself and you lay it out flat, and it's quite a bit of space. But now you've got the trouble of trying to get in there, and try to get all of that grit and grind and detritus out of the texture of the steering wheel. So you got to come at it from a lot of different angles. And arguably the worst parts of it are sort of behind the steering wheel, where the fingers sort of wrap around. Not generally the face so much. If you leave Mr. Steamy alone long enough, he will collect quite a lot of water in the tube or in the line, and it's good practice to blow that out before you start steaming with him, because you start blowing a bunch of water, even though it's hot water, and it'll dry pretty quick. You don't really want to blow a bunch of water into the electrical stuff. Definitely not the airbag stuff. Steam's not such a big deal, but straight water, nah, don't do that. I have a real love-hate relationship with the head mount GoPro. There's a part of me that wishes that I could just figure out, how to mount it so that it always gets the view that I want it to get, because that would be in my opinion, that's the most attractive, but in practice it just never really seems to work out like that. Now, I didn't get it on video, and I should have probably tried to get it on camera, but, as I'm doing this job here on the steering wheel, all of the runoff water from Mr. Steamy is falling down onto that rear passenger heater vent, kind of the one that's on the floor right there that goes underneath the seat and heats the rear portion of the passenger compartment. All of that runoff, and you can kind of see right now where it's looking a little dirty down there, and by the end of the steering wheel, looking down there it was disgusting. There was just so much nasty runoff that had come off of the steering wheel, and I'm doing a portion of the steering wheel, and then I'm wiping it off with a rag, and so for that much runoff to be making that much of a mess was like, oh god. But this is why we're doing it.
Aww.
I got a lot of rotations out of the steering wheel before it locked. I was really surprised. This is one of those moments where the camera, kind of, it's not getting the shot that you want it to get. There was even one point, I think, where I hit the GoPro on the A-frame. Kind of silly. It's a pain to get to the back side of that steering wheel like this, but like I said, you can feel it. Your fingers can feel it when something is clean or when it's not clean. And it's not even one of those, conscious things, I think. If you grab onto the steering wheel and it feels dirty, or you get the idea that it feels dirty, it's just going to be dirty. And those kinds of, I don't even know how you call it. That sort of psychology, or that, that idea going into it, if you're selling cars, it goes a long ways. We live in a digital age now, and it's not, for a while now, I have thought that it's never, the car being clean that sells the car. It's the pictures of the car being clean that sells the car. When people come to look at the car, if they're going to buy the car, that's just affirming what their eyes already saw. You know what I mean? The adage, first impressions are the most important, has never been more the case than it is now. You ever been shopping for cars and, somebody had a picture of their car and there was just trash and shit all over the floorboards and, jackets and sweaters and hats all over the seats, and you're just like, oh no, it's just filthy. And they go, well, to clean up nice. Well, if it was clean, you may have thought a lot differently. First impressions are real important. Okay, so here I'm going to start in on the dash, and because I have experience scratching these dashes, I now choose to wrap a rag around the bristly end, the brush end of Mr. Steamy's wand. It kind of sucks to use that way. when the rag gets wet, steam will start coming back at you towards your hand and burn the shit out of you. But for now, this is how I'm doing it. Now I've scrubbing bubbles them, I have magic erasered them, I've steamed them, I've done all of those things. But dashes are never really too greasy, you know, once you cut that armor all. Now this is something that I enjoy doing, I like doing. I think there's a lot of funk, apparently I'm in the funk. There's a lot of funk that lives in the HVAC system. You know, there's a lot of moisture down in there. If the AC's running, it can get bad, it can get ugly down in there. So this is my new thing, just to run as much steam through it as I can and really clean all that up. At least sterilize it as much as I can. Alright, I'm cleaning up some of that nasty runoff from the steering wheel. It was bad. I'm looking at the rag going, oh fuck. Gross. Now this is something that's often overlooked by detailers. I see a lot. You know, they'll clean inside there when the car's in park, but they don't clean inside there when the car's been shifted into all of its gears. And every gear seems to expose a new part of that plastic underneath, so you may click it in reverse and find a bunch of grit and nonsense down in there, a bunch of nasty in there. Or, you know, you may put it into, you know, drive and then, you know, hold minus or hold down, downshift down, and then, you know, see a bunch of stuff that, you know, hadn't been cleaned. So I definitely take time to run it through all of its gears and clean each portion of it so that as you're running it through the gears, you never see a bunch of detritus down in there. Now I have gone as far as to take apart that entire assembly and pull that sleeve. I don't know if it's a sleeve or I don't know how you call it, but I've pulled that black plastic from the gear selector out and cleaned it, you know, on the bench. And I forget why I did that. There were other reasons why I had to get in there. I think maybe a light was dead or something, so I already had to get in there anyways, or I had to reassemble something. There was some other reason why I had to do it, but definitely don't recommend doing it because it kind of sucks. Now you'll see what I mean about the glossiness or the sheen on the hard plastics when we get to the handbrake handle next. You can see it right now. It's, you know, kind of shiny. It's, you know, it looks fine. But, you know, after it's been steamed, it takes on this matte look and it just looks less greasy. It looks clean. It was just occurring to me today just how much time I spend cleaning stuff. It's exhausting. Now, I don't know if I got it on video, but I did end up doing all of the knobs for the HVAC and, you know, the stereo and the glove box door, you know, the fuse box area, the panel over there on the driver's side, the mirrors, interior illumination level, you know, all of that area all gets cleaned in the same way. There's not a lot of hard plastic left untouched by the time I'm done. I will touch up the headliner as needed. So in a second here, you're going to see just what I mean. You see how like it's just not as glossy anymore, and it's still a little wet and it's drying, but it just has more of a satin or matte sort of look to it. And when you feel it, like, you know it's clean. Anyways, you could use Mr. Steamy to clean, you know, spots in the headliner as well. Oftentimes I'll, you know, find a spot in the headliner, take the brush off, and just hit it with, oh yeah, don't forget that part. So I drop it and lose it. Those things are hard to find in junkyards. Worth its weight in gold. Anyways, you can touch up a headliner. You can clean a headliner with Mr. Steamy real easy. If there's a spot in it, just pull the brush off, just hit it with the steam end, and it's good to go. GoPro 9 doesn't focus real well close up, unfortunately, so you don't get a chance to really see how much nastiness there is on that thing, but you know, we're gonna follow the same procedure as everything else that we've done. Now already you can see the runoff and how nasty it is, but here in a moment you'll get a chance to see really how bad it is. You know, and this is just the gear selector. I mean, this is touched one time. You get in, you put it in reverse. You get in, you put it in drive. You know. You figure if the gear selector looks this bad, the gear shifter looks this bad, you gotta figure the steering wheel was pretty bad. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any way to get you a good before and after, but I mean, things like new. And here comes your close-up. So another nasty bit is the center console. And I do spend quite a bit of time on the center console. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies in it. You know, again, I don't worry about any of the electronics. The heated seat controls are more than capable of taking the steam. I've never had any issues with them. I've never had any issues with the cigarette lighter, which I will knock the shit out of later. Now the plastic surrounding the, yeah, look at that. The plastic that surrounds the cup holders, it's almost like a coated plastic of sorts. Like there's like a paint or some sort of finish or other plastic or maybe even a rubber put, like a soft touch put over it, over the plastic. Now, if you take Mr. Steamy and you hit that part real hard with Mr. Steamy, you can destroy it. It won't cut it, but it begins to lift it off of there, so you'll end up with it. It sort of starts to look scratched. There are some spots on this that you do have to take care not to overdo it. Just don't overdo it. A little goes a long way. Now the bottom portion of the cup holder is like a rubber liner. So the liner part of it and the clip-in separator, I actually forgot to clean those, so both of those ended up in the dishwasher. Which is not a bad way to clean, hard plastics like that, as it turns out. There's so many little nooks and crannies in that thing. The slide where the sliding door goes down, a bunch of shit gets caught in there. All these little, corners and just that little area right there. There's a lot of room for nastiness to build up. So here's something important that I learned pretty early on with Mr. Steamy. Does great on any surface that you can get Mr. Steamy on, but here in a second you'll see me take those. Yep, right there. Now do the other side. It's just one of those things, like, you may not think about it, or maybe you do, I don't know, but I personally don't think about it until, you hit the switch, and then you're looking at the underside of it, and you're going, man, that looks greasy, or that looks oily. So it's just best to do it now. Now here's another heavy grit area right here. That's where the parking brake leather boot drops down into. And there's a lot of stuff that makes its way down into that. Camera was very much an afterthought to me at this point. I wasn't thinking before, I wasn't thinking framing, I wasn't thinking really anything. I'm just so used to being, a photographer and just getting the shots that I needed to in order to, convey the message that I want to convey. But video is an entirely different thing because the video is what you're conveying. And so, still very much learning. You can kind of see there as the scrubbing bubbles fades away just how much stuff has spilled down the side and left its trail of grossness. So, and if you don't take the seats out, that's going to be a really tough spot to try to clean up. And there's that beautiful matte, I am clean as fuck finish. And I always take time to try to, blow out the cracks. Good detailing is great, but it's easy to tell when somebody's half-assed it. And that's one of those moments. You look down in the cracks and there's a bunch of detritus down in there. It's like, nah. But it doesn't really pay to do it doesn't really pay to do work on this level, excuse me. Nobody... maybe there's some folks that would appreciate what I'm doing here, but certainly don't have people beating down my door to get me to do it. How do you even charge for something like that? I'm gonna spend 3 days cleaning the inside of your car. It's all of 120 square feet by the time you've counted up all of the extra surfaces. It's unrealistic. This is really the only way that it's realistic is, you've pulled the engine out of the car, you're waiting on parts, you're waiting on, machine work, you're waiting on an engine being built, whatever. And you want to keep forward momentum, and one day you're probably going to end up selling the car. And, my wife and I, we're real light on cars, especially her. She's really good about, she drives these cars that are redone in this fashion, and, she's not eating, sun chips or, anything that makes... Now look at how much stuff is on that table. It's so gross how much, the runoff that there is. Anyways, she's really good about the cars. Things don't end up disgusting in her care. So my neighbor across the street, the old man, Charlie, I'll try to throw his picture up if I remember. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but my house is literally a revolving door of neighbors. There are people stopping by all the time. And as soon as the garage door is open, sometimes it's just like, I hardly get an hour or two to work. There's just people coming over constantly. And I love my neighbors, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying he was here now and talking about this, that, or whatever, but he doesn't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And you can see it as that moisture starts to, fade away and dry out. How it goes from, sort of what it looked like, greasy or oily or maybe even a little wet and shiny to, that clean, matte, new look. I really like that look. I suppose in the end, ultimately, this comes down to it's just my preference. I like the way it looks when you do stuff like this, and if you add up the time that it takes, it doesn't really take that much time. So anybody with one of these cars would recognize that, but if you don't have one of these cars, you may not note that that is the gas door. So that lives driver's side on the left-hand side near the door. You reach down and you pop it. That is one of the nastiest spots. That thing collects so much dirt. And you can kind of see from the runoff how bad it is. Mr. Steamy's got some power. Now, if you have a Mr. Steamy, you're already aware, but if you don't have a Mr. Steamy and you're thinking about getting one, be careful, because you could burn the shit out of yourself. I've been burned by Mr. Steamy so many times. I don't even mess around anymore. If I think I'm going to get burned, nah. Get a rag. I think I got some pictures of that, so I will, I'll throw those into the video. Well, the number of cleaned parts keeps growing. And those seats turned out nice. Have a look at this. Yeah, it's like brand new. Not a spot in it. Inside come out real nice too. And of course the most important, the steering wheel. Anyway, everything's all cleaned up in here. Got the handbrake, gear selector. We sterilized the HVAC system with steam. So now things just need to dry and put it back together. We've got the rear doors too. So some before and afters here. Now you can steam off all of that, the lettering, the icons, the decals. You can remove those with the steamer if you're not careful. Nobody ever cleans their brake pedal or, the gas pedal. Now, the Subaru version switch. You hit that thing with Mr. Steamy and it turns that color, and I cannot understand why. You can hit it with like an Armor All or, Meguiar's interior or something along those lines, and it'll turn black again. But it's never ever quite right, so maybe you ought to be careful if you're going to try to use Mr. Steamy. And, the biggest takeaway from that is that I need to find myself rags that are lint-free, because them most definitely ain't lint-free rags. Which is unfortunate to go through all of that effort and, still have lint all over everything, because your rags suck. All right, well, thanks for hanging out. I suppose in the next episode we ought to, put everything back together. Put the interior back in. And then after that, I guess we can start putting the engine together. So, stick around.